Tom Bennett lived on a lonely stretch of Wyoming land, where silence spread wider than the horizon. His cattle were his only companions, and the wind was the only voice he heard. For 15 years, no woman had crossed his doorstep. No laughter had echoed through his cabin. His story was one of heartbreak, buried deep. Years ago, Tom had given his heart to a girl in town, only for her to leave with a merchant who promised more wealth. That wound scarred him, and ever since, he swore off love. He built fences around his ranch and his heart. Day after day, Tom's routine stayed the same. Rise before dawn, saddle his horse, check the herds, repair what the weather tore down. At night, he'd sit by the fire with black coffee, staring into the flames, wondering if life had more to give than toil and silence. He rarely went into town. When he did, folks greeted him kindly but with distance. They knew Tom as the man who worked hard but kept to himself. Children whispered stories about the old rancher, who had no wife, no family, and eyes that looked 1,000 miles away. One dusty afternoon, Tom received a letter among his usual supplies. It was odd, addressed neatly bearing his name in flowing handwriting. He opened it, puzzled. Inside was a message from an agency he had never written to, confirming the arrival of a mail-order bride. Tom chuckled bitterly. Mail-order bride, not me. He tossed the paper aside, thinking it nonsense or a mix-up. But the words haunted him that evening, echoing as he tried to rest. He hadn't touched a woman in 15 years, and the thought stirred memories long suppressed. Days later, a stagecoach rattled down the dirt road. Tom, wiping sweat from his brow, watched as it stopped before his ranch. Out stepped a young woman in a sky-blue dress, clutching a single worn trunk. She looked around nervously before her eyes landed on him. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Tom Bennett?" she asked, her voice delicate yet determined. Tom tipped his hat, wary. "That's me," he answered, her lips curved with relief. "I'm Clara. I was told I'm your bride." His stomach dropped. Fate had played a trick on them both. Tom shook his head. "There's been a mistake, miss. I never sent for a bride." Clara blinked, confusion clouding her eyes. "But I was given this letter." She pulled out the same agency's document with his name written clear. Somehow, through error or fate, she'd been sent here. He considered sending her back, but the coachman was already gone, dust trailing down the road. Clara stood there stranded, clutching her trunk like a lifeline. Tom sighed. "Well, come inside. We'll figure this out." For the first time in years, a woman crossed his threshold. His cabin was plain, wooden walls, a small stove, shelves stacked with tools and books. Clara set down her trunk, eyes sweeping the space. "It's simple," she said gently. Tom grunted, embarrassed by its starkness. "It's enough for me," she smiled faintly, softening the air. That night, Clara prepared supper with what she found in his pantry. The smell of stew filled the cabin, a fragrance Tom hadn't known in years. They sat across from each other, spoons clinking in silence. For once Tom's meal didn't taste of loneliness. Over the following days, Clara settled into a rhythm. She mended Tom's shirts, swept the cabin, and sang softly while she worked. Tom tried to keep distance, burying himself in chores, but the warmth of her presence seeped through the cracks of his guarded heart. Tom noticed the way sunlight caught her hair when she stood by the window. He noticed how her laughter eased the tension in his chest. He caught himself lingering too long, then scolded himself. She wasn't his wife. She wasn't even meant to be here. Clara, too, struggled with the situation. One evening she confessed, "I was promised to a man out west, but the letters brought me here. Maybe it was a mistake, or maybe it was destiny." Her words unsettled Tom, who had long stopped believing in fate. Storm clouds gathered one night. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning split the sky. Outside, a horse panicked in the corral. Tom rushed out into the mud, trying to calm it. Clara followed with a lantern, her dress plastered with rain, her determination unwavering. Together they soothed the terrified mare, Tom gripping the reins, Clara whispering gently. By the time they returned, both were drenched, hair clinging to their faces. The firelight in the cabin painted them in gold. Their eyes met, and something shifted silently between them. Tom's chest ached with feelings he thought dead. He longed to reach for her, yet held back, fear chaining him. Clara, trembling, seemed to wait, her lips parted as if expecting words or touch, but the moment stretched, and Tom turned away muttering about drying off. The following morning, the air between them was heavy. Tom worked harder than usual, avoiding her gaze. Clara moved quietly, though her eyes followed him with unspoken questions. The mistake that brought her here was becoming more tangled than either expected. Days turned to weeks. Clara brought warmth into the cold cabin, turning it into something resembling a home. She planted flowers by the porch, stitched curtains, and filled the air with humming. Tom resisted at first, but slowly he began to cherish it. One evening while fixing a broken fence together, Clara cut her hand on a nail. Tom rushed to her side, wrapping her hand in cloth, his touch tender. The brief contact burned in his memory, stirring both desire and fear. He hadn't touched a woman in 15 years. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire replaying the image of Clara's hand in his. He realized how desperately he missed closeness, the warmth of another soul. Clara was asleep in the next room, but her presence filled the cabin, filling him with restless longing. The more Tom tried to deny it, the stronger it grew. He caught himself watching her, listening for her laughter, even waiting for her footsteps. Clara too seemed to sense the pull between them, her glances lingering longer each day. One evening Clara asked, "Why do you hide from me, Tom?" He froze. "I don't hide." She shook her head. "You've locked your heart away, but I see through it. You're kind, strong, and hurt. And maybe we were meant to find each other." Tom had no answer. He only stared, his heart pounding louder than the silence. For 15 years he had lived without a woman's touch, without. Now, by some twist of fate, a bride had arrived by mistake, yet he wondered if it was truly a mistake at all. The next day Clara joined him in the fields. She struggled at first, unused to the rough work, but her determination impressed Tom. She stumbled, laughed at herself, and pressed on. Tom watched her, secretly admiring her grit. Something inside him softened every time she smiled. Evenings grew gentler. They began sharing stories by the fire, hers of growing up in a small town, his of lonely years on the plain. Clara's laughter blended with the crackle of burning wood, and for the first time in ages, Tom felt like a man instead of a shadow. Still he feared his heart's betrayal. At night, when Clara's soft breathing drifted from the next room, Tom lay awake, fists clenched. He wanted to reach out, to let love in again, but doubt whispered that she deserved more than a weathered rancher with scars too deep. Clara noticed his distance. One morning she said gently, "You treat me as if I don't belong, Tom, but I'm here, and I don't believe fate sends us where we shouldn't be." He looked away, unable to answer, afraid her hope would shatter if she truly knew him. Summer rolled across the land, bringing warmth to the fields. Together they rode horses, mended fences, and shared meals under the wide blue sky. Their partnership grew natural, and Tom realized how easily Clara had become the missing piece in the rhythm of his days. A letter arrived one afternoon, carried by a passing rider. Clara's hands trembled as she opened. The message was from the agency, apologizing for the mistake, and offering to send her to her intended match. Tom's chest tightened as he watched her read it in silence. That night, Clara confessed, "If I leave, I'll always wonder what could have been here with you." Her eyes shone with tears, but her voice was steady. Tom felt words catch in his throat, but all he managed was a quiet, "It's your choice, Clara, always." Days passed without her decision. Tom worked harder than ever, hiding his dread. Every sunrise could be her last on the ranch. Yet when he saw her tending flowers by the porch, or humming as she baked bread, he secretly prayed she'd never leave. Clara, meanwhile, battled her own heart. She thought of the man she was promised to, yet her soul leaned toward Tom. His strength, his quiet loyalty, his hidden tenderness, they drew her like the stars drew travelers across the dark plains. She wondered if destiny had been rewritten. One evening Clara placed the letter on the table. "I'm not going," she said simply. Tom's heart surged, though he kept his face stern. "You're sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I belong here, with you." Silence stretched, heavy and fragile as Tom struggled to trust the moment. The ranch tested them with harsh days. A calf was lost to sickness, Fences collapsed under storms and drought threatened the pasture. Clara stood by Tom through every trial, her spirit unbroken. He realized she wasn't just a guest, she was a partner he had long needed. In the quiet hours after work, Clara would sit on the porch, sewing by lamplight. Tom found himself sitting beside her, their silences no longer heavy, but comforting. The distance between them narrowed, like two rivers bending toward one another, bound to. Then came a night when Tom returned from the fields to find Clara asleep by the fire, her sewing fallen to the floor. He gently covered her with a blanket, his hand lingering near her cheek. The warmth of her skin nearly undid him, but he pulled back. Clara stirred, half awake, whispering, "You don't have to hide, Tom." Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. That night, he paced the cabin, torn between desire and fear, between a past that chained him, and a future that called with Clara's gentle voice. Morning brought clarity he couldn't ignore. Tom saddled his horse and rode to the ridge, overlooking the valley. He breathed the vast silence, realizing he was still that lonely man, but he didn't want to be anymore. Clara had lit something inside him, and he couldn't let it die. When he returned, Clara was by the porch, watering the flowers she had planted weeks before. He dismounted slowly, walked up, and said softly, "Clara, I've been a fool. I thought I was protecting myself, but all I've done is keep us apart." Her eyes filled with hope. She set down the watering can, stepping closer. "Then stop, Tom. Stop hiding. Let yourself feel again." The tremor in her voice betrayed how much she longed for him. His breath hitched as he realized how deeply he longed for her too. Tom reached for her hand. This time he didn't pull away. Their fingers interlaced, rough calluses against soft skin. It was a simple touch, yet it felt like breaking chains that had bound him for 15 years. Clara smiled through tears, and Tom knew there was no going back. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, they sat together on the porch. Tom's arm rested around Clara's shoulders, her head nestled against him. The ranch stretched before them, the cattle grazing, the sky painted gold. For the first time it felt like home. Inside the fire glowed warmly, but Tom realized the true warmth was beside him. Clara, who had arrived by mistake, had become the very thing he needed most. The mistake no longer mattered. What mattered was the love slowly, steadily, taking root in their home. Autumn swept across the land, painting the hills in copper and gold. The ranch carried a quiet peace, and so did Tom's heart. He and Clara worked side by side, the rhythm of their days steady and shared. What once felt like loneliness now felt like belonging. At the harvest fair in town, Clara walked proudly beside Tom. Whispers followed them, curious eyes studying the once solitary rancher, with the woman at his side. Tom felt the stares but didn't shrink from them. For the first time he wasn't ashamed of being seen. Clara drew admiration with her grace, her laughter lighting up the evening. Men tipped their hats, women whispered kindly. Tom stood taller, realizing how much she had changed him. She was no longer an accident on his porch. She was his partner, his. That night, Clara admitted, "I thought I'd feel out of place here, Tom, but with you, I've never felt more at home." Her words wrapped around his guarded heart like a balm. He touched her cheek gently, marveling that fate had brought her to his door. The season turned harsh again, snow sweeping in from the mountains. Tom worried Clara would find the isolation unbearable, yet she proved resilient, waking early to stoke the fire, cooking warm meals, laughing in the glow of lamplight. Her spirit carried them both. On one frigid night, the storm cut off their path to town for weeks. Supplies ran low, and the cabin walls seemed to close in. Yet Tom discovered something surprising. He didn't dread the confinement. Every hour spent with Clara only deepened his bond with her. One evening, with snow piling outside, Tom finally spoke the words he had buried. "Clara, I've spent 15 years locked away from life, but with you I feel alive again. You've brought me back to the world." She blinked back tears, whispering, "And you've given me love." Their lips met for the first time, tender and hesitant, but filled with years of longing. Tom felt the weight of his solitude crumble, replaced by warmth so fierce it stole his breath. Clara's embrace was both gentle and sure, sealing what words could. From that night onward, their relationship bloomed openly. They shared laughter, touched hands without hesitation, and leaned on each other as though they'd always been meant to. The ranch, once a prison of silence, now echoed with the sound of two hearts entwined. The neighbors soon noticed the change in Tom. When he rode into town, he no longer looked weary and withdrawn. His eyes had softened, his posture lighter. Clara walked beside him, her presence undeniable. Together they carried a quiet strength that silenced gossip. One morning Tom crafted a small wooden box with his own hands. Inside he placed a simple silver band, bought years ago but never used. That evening by the fire, he knelt before Clara, voice rough with emotion. "You came here by mistake, but I can't imagine life without you. Be my wife." Clara's tears glistened in the firelight as she whispered yes. She slipped the ring onto her finger, her hands trembling. Tom kissed her knuckles reverently, a man who once thought love lost forever now, finding it in the most unexpected. Their wedding was simple, held in town with a few neighbors gathered. Clara wore a modest white dress, and Tom stood straighter than ever before. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, applause filled the air, but Tom only saw Clara's radiant smile. Back at the ranch, Clara made the home truly theirs. She sewed new curtains, hung wildflowers to dry, and filled the shelves with books. Tom built her a rocking chair by the hearth, where she sat in the evenings, reading aloud as he listened. As spring came again, Clara announced she was expecting. Tom froze, then gathered her into his arms, laughter and tears mingling. The thought of a family, once a dream he buried, now bloomed into reality. His ranch would no longer echo with silence, it would ring with life. Tom threw himself into preparing for the child. He built a cradle from pine, sanded smooth and lined it with soft cloth. Clara stitched by hand. Each nail he drove into the wood felt like sealing a promise, that this child would never know the loneliness he had lived. Clara glowed with quiet joy as the months passed. She worked slower now, resting more but still hummed while cooking or mending. Tom often paused from chores just to watch her, marveling at how his once empty cabin now held warmth, laughter, and the promise of new life. The neighbors who once pitied Tom now stopped by to visit, offering advice and gifts. The ranch no longer felt cut off from the world. Clara's presence drew people in, like light shining through a window. After years of darkness, Tom felt richer than any man alive. One starry night, Clara woke Tom with a whisper. Her time had come. Fear shot through him, but he steadied himself, guiding her through the long, hard hours. When at last the baby's cry pierced the night, tears streaked Tom's face. He held his daughter, fragile and perfect. Clara, exhausted but smiling, whispered, "She's ours, Tom." He kissed her damp forehead, voice breaking. "I never thought I'd have this, you, her, a family." In that moment, the 15 years of loneliness vanished, replaced by a future brighter than he dared imagine. Life changed swiftly. Nights were broken by the baby's cries, days by the work of ranching and parenthood. Yet Tom embraced it all, never complaining. Every chore, every sleepless hour felt like proof that his world was alive, vibrant, and worth every ounce of effort. Clara proved to be his equal in strength. Though weary, she never faltered in her devotion. Together they shared the burdens and joys of raising their daughter, each glance between them carrying the quiet knowledge that their love had been born from chance and fate. Years passed, seasons turned, and their family grew. The ranch thrived, not just with cattle but with laughter and play. Children ran across the fields. Tom once rode alone. Clara's voice carried through the home, calling them in for supper, weaving warmth into every corner. Tom often sat on the porch, his youngest child nestled in his lap, watching the sunset. Clara would sit beside him, her hand in his. He would marvel at how far life had carried him, from a man who thought love gone forever, to a husband, father, and fulfilled soul. Neighbors sometimes asked if he regretted the mistake that brought Clara to his door. Tom always chuckled softly. "A mistake? No, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Fate just had a funny way of sending me what I needed most." Clara would smile at those words, leaning her head against his shoulder. She knew too that the path had been uncertain, but it had led them to love, to family, to life shared. In the quiet of the plains, where once only loneliness lived, joy had taken root. Even as the years deepened lines in Tom's face, and silvered his hair, Clara's presence kept him young at heart. Her laughter still stirred him, her touch still calmed him, and her gaze still carried that spark of destiny he saw the first day she arrived. Their children grew, some leaving to build lives of their own, others staying to tend the ranch, but no matter where they went, they carried with them the love that had blossomed from a chance mistake. a love their parents had nurtured through every storm. One evening, with the fire crackling low and the children gathered home for a visit, Tom looked around the room. Laughter filled the air. Clara's hand rested in his, and he realized he had been given everything he once thought impossible. The ranch was no longer silent. He whispered to Clara, 15 years I spent without love, without touch, then you came, by mistake, and now, I can't imagine a life without you. Her eyes glistened, and she kissed him softly. There are no mistakes, Tom, only the paths meant for us. The rancher who had once lived in shadows, now lived in light. His story was no longer one of heartbreak and silence, but of love found when least expected. A woman's arrival by mistake had given him a destiny richer than he ever dreamed. And as the sun set over the Wyoming plains, Tom held Clara close, the sound of his family echoing through the cabin. He no longer feared loneliness. He no longer feared fate, for he had learned that even the loneliest heart can bloom when love arrives, sometimes by mistake.